All you guys.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you for attending our session. My name is Lizette Olson. I'm the Executive Director of AWARE out here in Mercer County, last exit I-80 before you hit the Ohio border. The other people on the screen with us, is Carol Wasser, CEO and founder of Ohana Link Technologies, and Tom McKinley, Chief Technology Officer of Ohana Link. Michelle Gibb, sadly, is sick with strep and laryngitis, and she was not inclined to scare all of you by trying to squeak her way through the presentation, so she will lurk through the chat section. Basically, our focus is looking at innovating victim services delivery, because from the pandemic that impacted all of us in life, not just victim services. We had to innovate pretty quickly and turn on a dime. Victim services was defined as an essential service by the state. And since congregate meeting wasn't allowed, and we had a lot of concerns in the early days of the pandemic about risk and infection for our staff as well as for those we serve, we needed to figure out how we were going to move forward. The impact from the pandemic then to now has been all-encompassing across all sectors. Particularly for those we serve, they were really impacted by housing and food insecurity, economic loss. At one point in time when we were looking at the full lockdown, we had victims, offenders, and children locked in their homes for an extended period of time, and the messaging from the state and the Fed, to be kind, was muddled. In our county, during this time of the pandemic, we experienced a significant increase in domestic violence homicide. We barely have one a year, and we're up to 7 at this point. And we also seeing increased violence perpetrated on victims. It's no longer just a simple visit to the emergency room. And given the impact of COVID, people we have are actually being sent over the border to trauma hospitals or for inpatient care in Youngstown, Ohio. During this time, the fear contagion actually seemed to be more impactful than the actual virus. We had a plethora of programs that were open, closed, somewhat open, somewhat closed, and that messaging also wasn't very clear to the general community. So many of us adopted work using Zoom platforms, using mental health HIPAA certified platforms. FaceTime was used, phone counseling was used, chat and texting functions were somewhat used. And for us here in Mercer County, safety planning that we are all required to do was expanded to include pandemic planning as well, to make sure that we were connecting victims to all supports that they needed and giving them clear information on what was happening in our counties. Now, as we're starting to move in a less challenged process from the pandemic and moving to post-pandemic recovery, people that we served using these different technology options are not going to be willing to go back to a traditional way of delivering services. So, how do we manage that? I know for myself, I'm an executive director of an age. Technology is something I have to do. It's not something I like to do. It's not part of my daily life like it is with our younger staff and many of the victims that we serve. So that's how I came to actually start having conversations with Ohana Link, because Tom McKinley and I share a lot of community connections with our board activity and our systems work in the region, actually throughout Western Pennsylvania. So he, unfortunately, during the early stage of my conversation with him back in fall of 2020, I was pretty clear about what I needed and what I thought victims would need and what our staff needed in terms of ease of effort and how do you document the service delivery, how do you keep people safe, how do you address confidentiality. Those were all conversations I had to have with him, but since I don't have the language of technology, I literally would say, I needed to do this, Tom, how do you do that? You need to dummy down director conversation with me to make that happen. So when we're looking at transitioning standard delivery, what does that look like? Brian, can you throw up the poll? So looking at other technology options, those of us in victim services and even procedural victims like victim witness, we've had these conversations, it seems, for a decade or so, but moving to an actual expansion of services delivery that is broadly embraced, that's not been as consistent. The pandemic really brought this to the forefront for those of us in rural and remote counties. A lot of our issues were everything in life was impacted. You know, our passes for mass transit in rural and remote communities stopped. So victims couldn't even get not even just services, they couldn't get to the doctor's office, to the pharmacy, to food. It was just incredibly disruptive. One thing we do know is pretty much everybody of a certain age lives on their cell phone. Their lives are in their cell phones. If you're not in their feeds, or if you're not somehow connected to their daily life in their cell phones, you're actually not present in their lives. So that's why I really focused on the phone app as a delivery mode, rather than looking at, let's develop another, platform for us. During our initial conversations, looking for funding for development and for the onboarding cost for the individual program and for the maintenance cost monthly for an individual program, Ohana Link and Aware went to our local community foundation of Western Pennsylvania, who was incredibly excited about this. And I have been telling everybody and anybody who'd give me 10 minutes to listen to this pitch. I think this phone app, Ohana Purple, will be one of the more transformative modes of service delivery since 1998, when we implemented PFA services through the courts. So during my conversations with Tom and Kara, I didn't want the phone app to be idiosyncratic just to Mercer County. I needed it to be focused on needs for all victims. And whereas my focus is on rural and remote counties, people who live urban, like Philly, really got hammered by the pandemic. This could be a resource for advocates working in Eastern Pennsylvania too, because it would reduce health risk of exposure and of moving throughout the community trying to deliver those services. So Michelle Gibb, who was our leader for the PCADV Western PA domestic violence programs, I approached her, since the region was meeting through Zoom very regularly, bi-weekly actually, and had some input. And I had Tom and Kara at that point, that was about 6 months after my initial conversation with Tom, to do a walkthrough on what the phone app can and cannot do, and to expand the conversation. And through that, not only did the executive directors of the domestic violence programs have input, we also invited younger interested staff to participate, because they're going to have, because as the ones who are actually going to be doing the work, they had real questions about how to apply this activity. Hang on. Look at this. Okay, so through Michelle's work, Michelle did a lot of work in the spring of 2021 and in the summer of 2021, making a pitch to private foundations in the Pittsburgh area to see how we could leverage this initiative. And it is a unique initiative between broadly defined victim service programs working with a private sector IT company to bring a new mode of services delivery for victims. And we just got word recently that Hillman Family Foundation had agreed to pick up the additional development and onboarding costs for the pilot programs that are participating here in Western Pennsylvania. So the full app is now funded for development and for onboarding costs for each of the 6 programs, as well as the monthly maintenance each program is looking to include. So that is kind of like in a thumbnail sketch, fast forwarded over the past year and a half, how this came to be. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kara. She's going to present to you a video and a PowerPoint, because if many of you are like me, I'm very visual when it comes to technology. I need you to walk me through how this works. So Kara and Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Lizette. I'm going to start by sharing a video that, really just talks about the background of how we got to this product. O'Hanlon Technologies developed a platform that enables individuals to privately deliver services. And so when Lizette came to us, it was almost a natural fit, especially for the fact that we were all in Mercer County, which was great. So it was a wonderful meeting of the minds, and what we've created is incredible, and we're really excited to share it with you all. So I'm going to start with the video, and then immediately following that, I'm going to take you through a PowerPoint presentation that will show you the features that we've built into the already developed platform and the functionality behind it that will enable you to deliver services, help more victims. That's the goal. So I'll start by sharing this video.
For agency specific, we are at a generational shift. Most of the leaders of nonprofits are my age, where we came into technology as an ever increasing encroachment on how we work. But for many of our younger staff, their lifestyles are directed by their feeds, by their cell phones, and the agency structures need to catch up to where people consuming and delivering services are. So despite the fact that I really don't understand the technology, and I refer to it as you need to have dummy director conversations to help me understand it, every nonprofit director, it's incumbent upon him or her to propel their agency forward by embracing technology like the Purple app for domestic violence survivors, because it's about meeting victims where they are, serving their needs. It's not about the comfort or discomfort of leadership of nonprofit organizations. They have to innovate regularly and routinely to be relevant, because if agencies do not embrace technology broadly defined, and for us in victim services, the Purple app, pretty soon victim services and victim need are going to be like two ships passing in the night, because our services will not be relevant to the primary population we're trying to reach. But COVID was literally a lesson in, you have lemons, you've got to make lemonade out of it. And because we could not have congregate meeting, we could not really do in-person meetings for a lot of activity, we utilized very quickly some online platforming, whether it was mental health platforms for telehealth presentations or Zoom meetings. And it became very apparent that victims needed something when we move out of the pandemic that they can continue using their technology. Because once people have obtained services in a way that's more time and cost efficient for them, they're not going to go back to an old standard of, can you be here Monday at 9:30? Especially for rural and remote counties where mass transit was hammered during the COVID pandemic for us. So people couldn't, if they didn't have their own car, they couldn't get places, they couldn't get to, the stores. There were so many things that were disrupted in rural and remote communities that delivery of services through the ubiquitous cell phone seemed to me to be the positive lesson we could take out of the pandemic, to innovate our services and actually promote autonomy for the victim. We talk about that all the time in victim services, about meet the Vic where he or she is. They're driving, that the victim's driving the bus. Well, this technology actually manifests that to a reality.
It was important for me to develop Purple, as this really has become a personal project for me, realizing that we had this platform and this technology that we could utilize to connect families, and being able to use that technology to help victims. My sister is a survivor of domestic violence, and so I always knew that I wanted to give back in some way to that world, and being able to utilize the technology that we've developed in this healthcare space has really become a special journey for me. It was important to start this journey of developing Ohanaling Purple because, after sharing our original product with agencies that we were working with, we realized that there was really this gap in communication between agencies and victims, and that they have been really underserved as far as technology goes, and realizing that the privacy behind our platform and the security that we could add to it to enable them to deliver services privately and safely was something that we could execute on. I think long term, it's going to enable us to help more victims and reach more people. And that's the goal, is to be able to reach those 90% of victims that aren't seeking services in a shelter, giving them a tool that's on a platform that they're used to already using, which is their phone. So it's a comfort device for them, and just really being able to help more people. That's the goal.
Make it safer for people to use in this environment. One of them is the trackless safety features, as we call it. It's kind of the leave no trace idea. The idea basically that if an abuser is determined to keep looking through somebody's phone to see if they're communicating, this does not leave any tracks for them to see. There's no cookies, there's no files laying around, there's no URLs, no text messages coming in, even phone calls. None of those things are utilized in our app or in any way that they can be tracked.
This is going to increase access to services and service providers, enabling them to reach more people by way of a mobile device. It's a very secure platform that enables them to talk asynchronously. So when it's safe for a victim to send a message, or when it's safe for a victim to receive a message, they can do that through the app rather than relying on communication through phone calls, Zoom meetings, and things that are out on the web, and giving them a traceable event.
Is more important now than maybe ever. Thinking about what happened through the pandemic, a lot of people were forced to be together a lot more than they normally would, and so that caused a lot of the incidences of abuse to become not only more numerous but more aggressive. And so we believe that having this technology now really does bring something that has never been available to the world quickly, and it allows them to be much safer.
Having the Purple app promotes seamless transition between people who go into emergency housing and go back into the general community. And for the 90% of people in the community who need services, they're going to be a lot more likely to access services if they're aware that there is technology that will make it user-friendly. Because it's cloud-based, it's not going to be discoverable, because many of the victims we serve, they're on phone plans with the offender who checks their phone for everything on the whole wide world. So the cloud-based feature is really amazing, I think. And I think because there's a lot of shame and a sense of not being believed by victims in terms of connecting to the larger community. This will help break down that barrier, particularly if there's a timely response on care coordination, working with law enforcement, particularly because for most victim service agencies, law enforcement is 24/7, just like victim service agencies are 24/7. So that timely, real-time response is the difference between life and death.
Thank you. So now that we've, really given a broad overview of the challenges that have been presented, not only because of COVID, but just because of, the way that times are changing and where people are spending their time in their mobile devices, and really being able to provide a solution that matches those things. And so I'm going to now share my screen again, this time show you what does the product do. 1 second here. Okay. Hopefully you all can see this. So as I briefly mentioned before, Ohanalink is already an operational platform. So when Lizette came to us, we actually, took a step back and we're like, how can we take what we've already developed and move it to this space by providing the privacy and security we know that is needed to keep victims safe and their information safe. So We spent a lot of time working with Lizette, Michelle, the Pennsylvania Coalition, on the Western Pennsylvania side, and really just diving into what were the challenges they were having, how could we utilize our platform, and what we came up with was the Ohana Link Purple that you're going to see. So really the challenges that we were looking at solving was this disconnection due to the isolation of COVID-19. The lack of privacy and control in the channels that they were using, maybe Facebook Messenger, text messaging, or Zoom even, reaching victims where they are, which is in their mobile devices, not restricting communication to a phone call, giving them that sense of security, that sense of control, and the access to the resources and services that they need right in their device. So it really becomes this this lifeline for victims through their mobile device. So Ohana Link Purple will have two versions. One is for the agency side and one is for the victim side. They essentially function the exact same way. However, the victim's version would have a camouflage cover on top of it. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute, but you might be wondering, how are they going to get away with having an app on their phone when their phones are so heavily monitored? And I think that we've come up with a really awesome solution to help with that. So this not only will help with the engagement of victims and the agency that they're working with, but it also brings in that intra-agency communication, access to resources which are customized based on their location. So imagine a victim coming into the shelter, they need access to food, they need access to transportation. All of those resources are available in a directory through their Purple app. And so they would have access to that directory. They would have access to contacts in those spaces that are specifically tailored for their location of services. And not only, are we focusing on the victim, we're focusing on the ohana of the victim or the victim's family as well. So there's opportunity when it's safe for a victim to bring in a trusted family member. As you saw in the video, my sister's a survivor of domestic violence, and I was completely isolated from her, not because she wanted to be, but because she had to be. And so in utilizing the Ohana Link Purple app, it will bring that engagement back to families that is often missing when they are dealing with an abuser. So aiding in the connectivity, enhancing the patient, victim, family support services, which we know is so critical to keeping victims safe, centralizing services and improving communication, giving access in one single source of truth. So this portal really becomes that single source of truth of information for not only victims to receive information, but for agencies to give the information to the victims that they need. So from the victim's side of usage, it will be, we have what we call a secure app wrapper on the app. So when the victim downloads the app, it will look like a coloring app. So they can download the app, it will function as a coloring app. And then there's just a secret gesture in here or a secret button that they would hit that would enable them to add numbers to unlock, as you see here in this second image. Numbers are typically associated with colors in coloring apps. So again, this is not strange, but this becomes a keypad for them to unlock the app and moving them then over to the Ohana Link Purple that you saw. The agency will be provided a designated code that will unlock the services for their particular agency. So they would click this add a room down here at the bottom, and then they would put an activation code in. That's how the app recognizes which agency they're dealing with, so that it knows which resources to unlock and who has access. So there's two separate views here, as you see, the organization. So you can have that intra-organization communications. The rooms would be a little bit different than if you were using a client room. And then as you see on the client view, we have access to the shelter, which is the bottom view, and then we have that family communication room, which can be used for, you know, the shelter friends, or their safe people in their family. So the profile function is completed by the agency itself. And so one of the things that in working with Lizette and Michelle was that this duplication of information, and making sure that this information can be gathered one time from Rose, and then, you know, dispersed as needed to other platforms that you're required to report to. So just making sure that we're collecting the information in the app, and anybody that's in the room would have access to that information as well. This is not visible by the victim, but only visible by the agency. Anybody that's an admin in the room, caseworkers or providers, would be able to send updates. So when an update is sent to Rose, we are considering push notifications that might say, it's time to color, or relax and color, or something that would be related to the coloring app, versus something that's going to draw them attention that would say, hey, Lizette's trying to get a hold of you. So the push notifications would also be camouflaged. Our initial rollout, we are actually going to consider not having any push notifications and see how that functions. And then Rose would be able to log in as needed and can view her messages when she's safe and able to. So you're not waiting for a phone call. You're not missing a phone call. It's that asynchronous communication. And then there's also the all guest chat. So the victim would be able to chat their way with their providers or their caregivers, one-to-one, one-to-many, via direct chat. And then any of the caregivers in the room would also be able to directly chat with a victim. One of the features that we've built in is called the incident log. The incident log enables a victim to record an incident, where they can upload photos, they can upload witnesses, they can have the time of the incident. So it really becomes a tracking tool for them. And this is a safer alternative than keeping pictures in their phones, keeping video in their phones. Phones often get smashed, and the data is lost. This would keep the data in the app, and it would push the information up to the cloud. Something else that's really important to note here is that we have decoupled the victim from their phone number. So their phone gets smashed, and all they have to do is log in on a different device. That is really incredible in a space like this where a victim is my sister. I can't tell you how many phones she went through, but it was a constant. She was losing who she even had access to, and then you're losing access to those victims as well. So this would really close that gap in removing them from their phone number. The second safety feature that we are working on is called the watchdog timer. It enables a victim to set a timer if they are going to have an encounter with an abuser. Maybe they're dropping children off, maybe they're getting some items from their home, or whatever the case might be. They can set that timer, and if the timer goes off, then their advocate is notified that the watchdog timer went off. You might want to do a well check on Kara. So that is again just another tool to help keep these victims safe. And then we have a feature in here called the to-do list, which enables caseworkers to provide lists of things that they might need to get in order to prepare themselves for an exit, get copies of birth certificates, schedule meetings, whatever those things are. The to-do list is also able to be created in here, and you can create multiple lists. There's a virtual meeting toolkit, which would give access to a Zoom meeting link, which would keep them right embedded in the app. So we're not, again, not kicking them out to a browser. And then also access to an email list. If they did want to create an email for some reason, maybe they're already gone or have access to a secret email, they would be able to create, just click the email me the list right there and create an email rather than trying to figure out how to get a hold of everybody via email. As a Ohana Link Purple client of ours, we provide all the customer service and customer support that your agencies would need, and that your victims would need as far as technical support. If they were having issues, we are always available for them as well. And again, that their confidential or their confidential information and their privacy is something that we take extremely seriously. We're also looking at end-to-end encryption of the data, which would mean that we don't have any of it. So if we are ever subpoenaed, it would be nothing that we would be able to produce because we don't have that data. So really, just taking that the confidentiality behind this, the privacy and the security and the safety of the victims has always been in the forefront of our development through the Ohana Link Purple product. And so I will stop there. And I think it is time almost for question and answers, but I'll divert to Tom. I don't know if you wanted to add anything related to the technology. But again, if you would like more information on becoming a partner of Ohana Links with the Purple product, we are starting to build a list of interested agencies that would want further information. So feel free to reach out to us at the info@ohanalink.tech. Get on that list. We'll be rolling out early 2022, late this year with the initial 7 agencies that Lizette spoke about earlier, and really just starting to get this into as many hands as possible.
Also, Tom, before you kick off, we did have a question in the chat. Someone asked about how do you manage cloud-based services if someone has a family plan with shared, with like a family cloud service. And the other is for agencies in the meeting. 2 of the things we were looking at also was for ETO documentation, finding a way to make that a lot easier for advocates to input their data, because what's the point of having a time efficient tool if they're going to spend a day and a half trying to download every single person's multiple contacts from working with the agency. So that's another focus we're working on, to reduce duplication in ETO and to capture the information particular for ETO.
Yeah, and one other thing that I want to address is the use of mobile devices from an agency's perspective. We are looking at, I don't know if you can see behind you on behind Tom, there's a device there that's rather large that makes the room management, the client management very easy to address. And so we're looking at opportunities to partner with T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, to get devices either donated or Ohana Link itself is, our social responsibility is this space. And so we're looking at different ways that we can help to provide these devices or work with your agencies to get devices in your hands. So if there's concern about, how are you going to get devices? I know Lizette had says there's many programs out there that support device management. So
one of the questions there was about victims are using family plans and things like that. We do not utilize any text messaging or phone minutes or anything like that. It's all just data. So yes, data does get consumed, but it's very little data. It's mainly text going back and forth inside of our encrypted channel. So there's really nothing that's going to show up other than that some data was used by this app, but it's a very tiny amount. We've really worked hard to deal with our trackless safety features, just to make sure that there are no traces left, no files laying around on the file system, that if a determined abuser was really poking around on the phone, they would be very, very hard pressed to find anything at all that showed that there was any communications going on with somebody at a shelter. One of the questions about old cell phones to be donated and used for this purpose, they need to be smartphones. We're not linked to super modern technology, but they do need to, be able to run, somewhat more modern apps and things like that. So again, we don't work through text messaging or anything like that because that leaves too many tracks around. You're muted, Lisette.
You're
We'll
still
speak
muted,
with
Lizette.
family
Oh, there
members.
she is.
For
The question is, will this app be utilized only for participants with the programs to communicate with the advocate and not with family members? The focus of the family group, for lack of a better phrase, is where the significant others will be sharing information with the victim. I would not be comfortable, and I'm speaking for myself, to have significant others having contact with the advocate through the victim's primary channel on Purple. There's another avenue that we can utilize for connecting significant others for the victims we serve, either by having their own room, their own channel feature within Purple, or just going through traditional methods. There's a question in there, is this mainly for connecting to services or to provide services? It's to provide range of services. It's not about just, oh, this is how you connect up with us. It's for literally reducing all the barriers victims face in trying to meet with us. I am aware during the pandemic, depending what county you're in, some of the courts continued live in-person activity, some did not. So that would be customizable depending on the county that you're in. But my focus with this was for how that 90% of people who don't need to come into emergency housing can access services in real, not in an artificial sense of this is my appointment time, but where they can check in with the advocate in real time. So, every single day. So it may not be 40-minute conversation, might be 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. But it's a way to have a more organic, authentic conversation with victims in real time to meet their needs.
And in addition to that, we also stress the asynchronous nature of, sometimes it's not safe for somebody to talk right now, but they can, whenever they have a spare moment or two, they can react to a message. So here I have a couple questions, or I can answer questions, whether it's, and it can be from different agencies. So if they're trying to have an interaction with an investigator, for example, there could be a channel set up for that. So the different agencies can be involved. And so you have this ongoing conversation going on, and you can get things done a lot faster that way.
Okay, and the follow-up question we have around communicating with family members. Yes, the family members can have direct conversations with the victim, completely divorced from the agency. That's what the family support room is, and there's actually functions in there. If there's a milestone, like say somebody, graduated from, got their GED or got a job or something, you can, the supporting family member can send a virtual balloon that says congratulations. We really wanted this to be functional for the victim to break down all those barriers of isolation.
We didn't dig deeply into the app live, which if we had more time, we could have done that. But the idea is that we have these different rooms that people can participate in. And so you can create any number of those depending on who wants to be involved with those. So those can be very private to particular functions. So if it's a mental health thing going on, that can be a completely private room. If it's a friends and family room, that can be completely private. If you have children involved that are, want to have discussions with their friends or whatever, there's a lot of ways to slice this. So we can have really any number of rooms in there.
There's a question in there about if an agency decides not to incur the operating cost but wants to promote among their clients, is that possible? It is per agency. So we are looking at ways to connect agencies with either their community foundations. We're also even looking at the potential for donations to sponsor Purple for a particular location. We have a lot of great connections with investor type individuals that look at giving back in some way. And so the technology and the purpose behind it is attractive to some. So yes, that cost can be, deferred in other ways than just on the agency, but we've made it extremely affordable for these agencies, knowing the funding.
Since I know a number of programs are going, this is so exciting, but it's going to be so cost prohibitive, I'm going to cry. Bottom line is we have tried with Hillman Foundation and Community Foundation of Western PA to absorb the development costs of this app. So there would be 2 additional costs for programs. One would be a one-time only onboarding fee to customize your particular agency and services available in your service area for people that you serve. The other would be a monthly maintenance fee, and that right now is $99 a month. And that's, because I was very clear with everybody that, victim services, we are poor. We have no money. So having a great idea is one thing. Having a great idea we can actually afford to implement is something very different.
And another question was raised about mentioning decoupling the victim from their phone number. What information do the victims use to log back in? One of the things we spent a lot of time on is trying to figure out how to do the onboarding properly. It turns out that onboarding is to do it safely and securely is not trivial. But that's where the app wrapper comes in. Right now it's a coloring app, but we will be able to switch that out as needed. But the point is that we have to understand who the person is. There has to be a point of contact initially that the agency needs to connect with that person. But after that happens, they're going to be creating and they're going to be getting an invite code, which is custom to them. They're going to log in. They're going to create their app or their account on the coloring app. Once that's set up, that's their basically their account input, and then they would need to use their special code to connect that to the Purple system. And once that's done, whenever they log into the coloring app, the system knows who they are, and then they can get back into the system, because of that. And so it really is that innocent logging into the coloring app, which makes that easier.
Yeah, and to address the training question, it is so simple. We would love to show you the actual walkthrough of the app. So if you feel, like you want to see that, please reach out to us and let us know. It'll take about 15 minutes for us to walk through that, and you can, invite your staff. We've done them for entire agencies, groups of agencies as well. So the training behind it is honestly very simple. We know that a victim is in a high stress situation 99.9% of the time. And so we needed to make it so simple. Yet there's a lot going on in that app that gives them that really fills the gap of need for them. So it is extremely simple.
I would also like to respond to a question we have about, is this how can this be utilized by law enforcement? And that was actually one of the first things actually I addressed with Tom when we had our first conversation. Because here in Mercer County, we have rural law enforcement. They actually use their own personal cell phones. They're not provided, municipal cell phones doing their work. But the pandemic presented real challenges when an investigating officer tried to do a follow-up with Vic because of all the challenges that were faced there. So working with our Chiefs Association, we were looking at, based on the victim's determination of, does he or she want, the investigating officer in the room to stay in contact with them. That's really what we're looking at, doing it to reduce the traveling around for local law enforcement. If it's literally just shooting out a question or confirming, a court appearance or something like that, rather than making it more complicated, we make it a lot easier for law enforcement to do that. And the other question is just wondering how victims will be made aware of the product. Part of our conversation in the pilot group here is that this is not going to be broadly defined. Oh, hey, here's a new product, because you don't actually want to advertise to offenders. There's a new way you have to have a stink eye about how people could get services. But But this is literally when people come in for service, whether it's through victim witness program or through a victim service program. When we're doing that intake, that's when you have a really deep dive conversation about needs, risks, threats, opportunities. And, you know, because not everybody is going to be wild about using this particular app. I can tell you, you know, in my county, you know, 20% of our service recipients are seniors, and they're not wild about technology. You know, we just deal with landline services for them. So, but that's a function of education and intake, having a proper conversation.
Okay, I think that's time for us. Thank you everybody for your attention and your interest in what we're working on here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. If you'd like to see that demo, we would be more than happy to provide that for you as well. So thank you so much.